So last time we were together, which was 2 weeks ago, we talked about speech objectives and the planning stage of doing a speech, right? The conceptual part of it. Today I want to go to the next stage, which would be once you have your concept, you have your topic, you have your idea, how do we put it down on paper? How do we organize our thoughts and outline it? And so that's what today's lecture is going to be. It's about outlining your speech. So again, this is the floor plan, you'll remember. And you're going to be prepared to reproduce that at a tutorial near you, coming soon. Maybe not today, but soon. Between now and the last tutorial, definitely. All right? But you remember, we talked about the objectives last time, right? What are the 5 objectives? Everybody gonna let Kezia answer for you, or can we try to do that all together? All right? On 3. Kezia, come lead them on 3. Come on, you did so well.
No, that's not what.
All right, from where you are, on 3, say it loud and proud.
General purpose,
Specific purpose, thesis, rhetorical question, keyword. General purpose, specific purpose, thesis, rhetorical question, keyword. Écoutez et répétez. General purpose, specific purpose, thesis, rhetorical question, keyword. All right? That's what's up in the objectives. Your documentation, remember, that's just your sources, your resources that you look up to get information on your topic, your sources, and your works cited or your bibliography, your references. All right? Then the rectangle boxes, again, represent the outline proper, which is what we're going to get into today. And today, we're going to focus on the body of your speech. All right? The body of your speech. What goes in the body of the speech? Your main points. All right? It's the heart of the speech. You know, you have the takeoff and you have the landing, but this is the main journey from point A to point B. All right? So you're going to start with the body and then create the introduction and conclusion. Now, when you're delivering your speech, you're going to, of course, start with your introduction and then go to the body and then the conclusion. But in the preparation phase, you're going to start with developing your main points, the body of your speech. Right? Then once you have the body of your speech and you know what that is, then you're ready to introduce it. Right? So, and then of course, you tack on a conclusion at the end, which is just a summary and a final, what we call a clincher statement, a memorable way of ending the speech. All right? So, we're going to start with our specific purpose. Obviously, the general purpose comes first, to inform, to persuade, to entertain, to honor, right? But here we are with a specific purpose. In this case, an example that if you were in my Comms 2101 class, did we do this one? All right, yes, we did do this one. So a couple of you, this will be repetition, but for most of you, this is the first time you're seeing this. So if I wanted to talk about the problem of counterfeit drugs, I saw something actually in the newspaper just this, it's been maybe 3 or 4 months ago. I think it was in the Guardian or CNC3, something that showed up in my newsfeed about a problem with some of the pharmacies in Trinidad having counterfeit drugs. You go to get a prescription filled, what you don't know is the pills that you're getting are really not the drugs that your doctor prescribed, but counterfeit stuff. So you find out about this, maybe you saw the same article in your news feed that I did and you want to do a speech about it. So this is what it might look like. Counterfeit pills threaten the integrity of the nation's drug supply. All right, so now we want to devise our central idea or our thesis. And again, that's the main message, the main idea that we want our listeners to go away with. It's the idea, it's the message that if our audience internalizes and remembers, then our goal will be accomplished, right? So again, we want them to know that there are counterfeit pills that threaten the integrity of the nation's drug supply. So a thesis for that may be, hey, there's some bad actors out there. There's some dishonest pharmaceutical companies that are using tricks to make fake pills seem legitimate. All right? And if you remember that, then you're going to be aware that there's a problem. So that's the message I'm trying to get internalized in your mind so that when you walk out, you're aware, okay? And you're going to act differently based on this information. All right, so now I need a rhetorical question. Where does the rhetorical question come from? Anybody besides Kezia? Or Tianandra? Or anyone else who was in my Comms 2101 class? Where's the rhetorical question come from? Yes, who said it back there? Very well. Who says the brightest students don't sit in the back row? Right? Say it again, loud and proud for everyone.
From the thesis or the central idea.
Right, from the thesis or the central idea. You just take your thesis and you turn it into a question. All right? So in this case, how do some dishonest pharmaceutical companies use tricks to make fake pills seem legitimate? We're focusing on the process here. How else could we word this question? Instead of how, we could ask what? Why? If I wanted to focus on the motivation, on the reasons that they're doing it, we would use why. But we know the reasons why. There's just one. Money, money, right? Money. That's why they're doing it. So we don't really want to focus on why they're doing it because that's obvious. We want to focus on how they're doing it so that if we understand the process of how it's being done, we can perhaps do something about it. All right? So now I need a key word. What's the key word do? What does the key word do? It's the organizing key word. There's your hint. What is it? If it's an organizing key word, what is it organizing? What'd you say? The points. Yes, the main points. So each of your main points in the body of your speech will start off with your key word. In other words, your key word is a reason. Reason 1, reason 2, reason 3. Your key word is a step. Step 1, step 2. Step 3, your keyword is a consequence. Well, the first consequence is this. The second consequence is this. The third consequence is this. You see, it's the organizing keyword. And it makes your main points parallel. It makes them pop. It makes it easy for the listeners who are hearing this for the first time and aren't familiar with it like you are, recognize what the main points in your speech are. It's like a road sign out there that says, oh, this is how far it is. And this is where we're going. So in this case, if the question's how, we're looking at the ways. Well, the one way they do it is, another way they do it is, and a third way they do it is. Right? If we were talking about a sequence, a chronological sequence, then our keyword would be steps. We'd say, well, the first step is they do this, and then the next step is they do this, and then the next step. But if it's not a sequential chronological thing, it would just be ways. All right, so if your rhetorical question starts with how, then your keyword will always be either ways or steps. Always. Why don't I see more people writing that down? That's important to know. That's good information right there. All right? If the rhetorical question starts with how, your keyword's always going to be either ways or steps. How does one become a successful student at UE? Well, one way is show up to lectures. Another way is attend tutorials. Another way is meet all the deadlines. Another way is join a study group. You see? You're talking about ways that you can be successful as a UE student. Not necessarily step 1, step 2, step 3, but just various ways that you can do. Not that you have to do every one of them in an exact order. Okay? So in this case, our keyword is way. So we want to talk about how they're doing it. Now it's time to answer that question. How are they doing it? What are the ways that they're doing it? This is where I go out and do my research, right? I look at some stories in the news, I read some articles, I look at some good websites that have accurate information, and I find out. I do the investigation, right? I do the research, and I come up with a list of ways. And I find out, well, the first thing they do is they concoct fake drugs using inorganic materials. All right? So they make these fake pills using inorganic materials. So I actually saw a story, a documentary, an investigative news report. It was on Dateline NBC a few years ago about this. And it showed how, and in this case, it was dealing with the problem in the U.S. and how there were problems with the U.S. drug supply. And there were these dishonest pharmaceutical companies in China, in this case, that were making fake pills. And you know what they were using to make the fake pills with? Drywall. Drywall, like plaster on walls, okay? And they were using drywall and just grinding it up into a powder and then forming the pills out of them. And then they just color them, coat them, stamp them, and make them look like the drug that they're knocking off, right? And the thing is, this was happening about the time there was a big scandal with Chinese drywall because it contained, I don't remember if it was arsenic or asbestos or it was some dangerous cancer-causing chemicals. They were grinding that into a powder, right? So imagine that, you know, your loved one or yourself needed a pill for their health condition, and instead they're taking drywall, right? Now maybe placebo effect is taking place and they actually get better, but then again, of course, there can be very serious consequences. People can die because of this kind of stuff, right? Now I want you to look at the wording of this main point. What's the word that jumps out at you? Say it again. Say it. You got a good voice for saying it. Say it again loud. Yeah, concoct. I mean, just the very word sounds like something bad, right? Oh, those evil criminals. They're concocting. You see? You don't use the word they make or they produce. Those are all morally neutral and okay. You're going to use the word concoct. Because what you're doing in your wording is you're reinforcing your main idea. What's your main idea? These are dishonest pharmaceutical companies. So what does a dishonest pharmaceutical company do? It doesn't make, it doesn't produce, it doesn't manufacture, it concocts. See, that's the difference in an A speech and a C speech. The A speech uses the word concoct. All right? And you continue your study. That's one way they do it. But then there's another thing they do. They mimic the drug design and packaging. So they make it look just like, you know, your grandpa's Viagra or whatever it is, right? But, you know, bless his heart, he, you know, thinks he's going to breathe new life into the romance and the marriage, and he goes and gets this Viagra he's heard so much about, and he takes it, but then no magic happens. So he goes back to the doctor and he says, look, I've tried this Viagra, it doesn't happen for me. He says, well, it doesn't work for everybody. Try some Cialis, right? And nobody finds out about it because they're mimicking the drug design and packaging. And this is where you would maybe put up pictures side by side and show how you can't tell the difference. They look the same. And then they make shady deals with drug wholesalers to distribute their fake. They don't, you know, they don't partner with them. They make shady deals. You see how the wording, just like the last word, the last main point, I use the word mimic. I didn't use replicate, something that just sounds sterile and neutral. Mimic. Nobody likes to be mimicked. That's a word that has negative connotations. Okay? Same way they're making shady deals. All right? And now for each of these, you're going to support your points. These are your main points. Now you're going to give a variety of support materials, statistics, examples, narratives, testimony. Okay? I remember a story a few years ago from the U.S. where there was a lady in Kansas City who died of cancer, and it sparked an investigation, and it turned out that there was a high mortality rate of cancer patients from patients who were getting their chemo at this one particular facility. And it raised red flags, and when they looked into it, they found out that the pharmacist who was providing the chemotherapy, the liquid chemotherapy that went into IVs for this clinic, was diluting it. He was cutting it like half with water.
Wow.
And so people their hair wasn't falling out, they weren't getting as sick with the chemo, and consequently, their cancer wasn't getting cured either. The tumors weren't getting shrunk. And so there's an example of this kind of thing, right, that you could find in the news. You could tell that story. There's a lot of pathos there. There's a lot of emotion, you see, and it really brings home your point. All right, and you just do that for each of your main points. Support it well. All right, when you do it this way, it creates this nice pyramid in terms of the structure and flow. Everything's flowing out of and pointing right back to your main idea, your thesis. So the main idea stays the main idea throughout your speech. And you have a tight, laser-focused speech. Nobody walks out of the room saying, I have no clue what he was talking about. She spoke well, but I don't know what she was saying. I mean, can you imagine getting off of an airplane after an 8-hour flight and saying, well, I don't know where we were going, but we sure did make good time? It'd be ridiculous, right? So keep the main idea, so that people know, right, what you're talking about. They don't have to guess. Organizing, developing your speeches, and organizing them the way I'm teaching you here will allow you to do just that. All right, so now let's talk about some guidelines for your main points. All right, I have them. I've got them supported. Now, what are some general guidelines for these? The first thing is to limit the number of points that you have. Less is more. Okay? I'd rather you just make 1 or 2 main points and make them really well than try to have 5 main points and just skim the surface. Okay? So with this speech, let's say your time limit, you're going to give a speech and your time limit is 4 to 6 minutes, let's say. And you do your research and you organize and you write out your speech and you give it a trial run, you rehearse at home and you time it. And when you give your speech, when it's all done, you're at 2 minutes and 42 seconds. And you're like, ugh. It's got to be 4 minutes. I'm only at 2 minutes and 42 seconds. What are you going to do? Well, most likely, if you're like many other students I've taught through the years, you're going to say, oh, I need another point. I got to have, no. You don't need another point. You need to better develop the points that you have. So before you think about going and adding more points, first, beef up the points that you have. Add more support, find another story, find another example, right? Get some statistics and some more facts to work in. Really develop and make those points well. And by all means, you have to have at least 1 point in your speech or else it's pointless. All right. But as a typical rule, 2 to 3, sometimes 4. What's going to determine how many points you have? The topic and the information. How many points do you need to answer your rhetorical question? Sometimes 1 will do it. Sometimes you might come up with 5 answers, but if you only have 10 minutes, You might have to prioritize and say, okay, I'm going to cover these top 2 or these top 3, and I'll have to come back to do the other 2, or give a supplementary handout or something on the other 2 instead of trying to cram it and talk real fast and cut out information to try to cover all 5. No, pick 2 or 3 and cover them really well. Okay. All right, word your main points succinctly and in a positive and parallel manner. All right, there are 3 things that I'm talking about, right? Word your main points how? Succinctly, positively, and in a parallel manner. What does that mean? To word your main points succinctly means what? Take your main points and word them succinctly. Concise. Main points should read like bumper stickers or like a catchphrase on a billboard. Okay, they should be short, pithy, to the point. They shouldn't have a lot of commas, conjunctions. It's getting too long, right? You're trying to put too many things in a main point. You're trying to take 3 main points and make 1 point out of them if you've got commas and conjunctions and all of that. So they should be short, succinct, to the point. Word them in a positive and parallel manner. Positively, all right? What do we mean by positively? Well, you might have heard the story about this preacher who he got a new church and he was going and started preaching at this new church, and he was so excited, and man, he was really on fire at this new church, and no pun intended, but he was preaching a lot of hellfire, brimstone kind of sermons, especially around Carnival. You know, all these sinners, you know, he was just telling them how they're going to go to hell if they don't repent and change their ways. And so after a couple of 3 weeks of this kind of preaching, some of the leaders of the church pulled him aside and said, you know, we appreciate your enthusiasm and your fervor and your passion and all these things, but can you just get up there this next Sunday and say something positive for a change? So he got up the next Sunday. I am positive you are a bunch of sinners headed straight to hell. That's not what we're talking about. So what I mean when I say word your main points positively, I mean word them in the affirmative. Tell people what to do instead of what not to do. Okay? So avoid using the word don't or do not. Okay? Don't have not, right, in your speeches. Instead, tell people what to do. You can take any negative and turn it into a positive, right? So don't drink and drive. Turn it into a positive. Designated a driver. That's what we're talking about. Tell people what to do, not what not to do. Don't forget to wear your seatbelt. Seatbelts save lives. Remember your seatbelt. So you get the idea, right? Don't eat too much sugar. Watch your sugar levels. Control your sugar levels. Too much sugar is bad for you. Exactly. So see, don't avoid telling. See, I'm doing it right now by telling you don't do this. Avoid, right? Instead of telling people what not to do, tell them what to do. Psychologically, I think an audience responds better. I know I do. If somebody tells me don't do something, I'll be like, I'm going to do it just to show you I can. Tell me what not to do, right? So it just sets us up in an adversarial position, right? And we don't want to be in that way. And then in the parallel manner means your main points, they should be similar in length. They should sound similar. They should have kind of the same rhythm, the same cadence, the same flow, the same kind of sentence structure. So for example, you might have subject, verb, direct object. Subject, verb, direct object. Subject, verb, direct object. So you would have the same structure to them, the same kind of flow. Dot, da, dot, da, dot. Dot, da, dot, da, dot. They sound the same. They just roll off so you can say them one after the other, and they just roll off your tongue, and they're easy to remember that way. Okay? So I'll give you an example. So here, let's say you do some research and you're concerned about the party scene, the fete scene at UE. Too much drinking and drugging going on, and that's scaring you. I don't know if that's the case. Just work with me. Work with me, all right? And so you want to give a speech, and your main ideas is don't use drugs, and when you drink, do it in a responsible manner. Do these two main points honor the guideline up here? Are they succinct, positive, and parallel? Yes? No? Why not? You shook your head. Tell me something that's wrong with them. I'm telling them don't do something, so I violated the positive rule. I said don't use drugs, so what should we tell them? Do use drugs. No, that's not. So what I tell them? Avoid drugs. Just say no. Right? Well, I'm not using the don't. If I say just say no, I'm telling you how you can be proactive. You see, otherwise I would say don't say yes. But when I say just say no, now you're on offense. See? Instead of defense. Okay, so thank you for that. There's a negative. What else? I'm hearing some mumblings. The second one is not very. How could you make that one more succinct? Drink responsibly. Ooh, I like that. 2 words. Turn 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 words into 3 with the same meaning. That's brilliant. That's what I want you to do. No, into 2. 9 words just got shazammed into 2. When you drink, do it in a responsible manner. No! Drink responsibly. That's all you need. Okay, so we had a negative, we had not succinct. Anything else? There's only one more option. It's not parallel. So who can tell me why it's not parallel? Someone on the back row, back center section. Red checkered shirt. Oh, gosh, yes. Are these 2 statements parallel in how they're worded and how they sound? Yes or no? No. So if I were going to make these 2 parallel, let's say I wanted to make the second one parallel with the first one, how would I do that? If I were going to make it parallel with the way this one is worded, I would say, don't drink irresponsibly, perhaps. Don't drink in excess, right? Now, I would still have the issue of it being worded negatively instead of in the affirmative, but it would be parallel. What if I wanted to make number 1 parallel with number 2?
When you use drugs.
Yeah, when you use drugs, do it. No. All right. When you are offered drugs, say no. I like that. So that would make it parallel, but it's not as tight and succinct as it could be. But at least it would be parallel. All right. So if I were going to do this and make them succinct, positive, and parallel, 2 main points, each has just 2 words, avoid drugs and drink responsibly. All right? Restrict each main point to a single idea. If you avoid conjunctions and commas, compound sentences in a main point, this will pretty much take care of itself. Right? But each main point should be one main point, all right? One main idea. You want to avoid announcements. Main points are not announcements. They are assertions. That makes a great fill-in-the-blank question, by the way, on a quiz. Main points are blank, not blank. Main points are assertions, not announcements. Okay. What's the difference in an assertion and an announcement? So an assertion is a statement of fact, but an announcement is, for my next point, I'm going to talk a little bit about the past. Okay, you've told me in general what the topic is, but you haven't told me what your main point is. What specifically about the past is your point? All you've done is given me an announcement. That's not a main point. Okay? Go ahead.
Make announcement assertion.
Main points are assertions, not announcements.
You're working it out. If you just keep on going, you got it. A little help from the peanut gallery. Main points are assertions, not announcements. They're statements of fact. Okay? Why do I say they're assertions, not announcements, instead of saying they are statements of fact, not announcements? Succinct, and an added bonus, alliterative. Assertions, announcements. Both start with an A. See, I'm trying, the steps I go to demonstrate this stuff to y'all and to give you examples. Thank you. All right, so back to where we were. So a poor main point would be this announcement. For my next point, I'll discuss tourists in space. All right, what about them? That's not a point.
Yeah.
That's an announcement. Tourism in space will become frequent by the year 2025. That's an assertion, okay? That's an assertion that now you can try to prove. You can argue your case, right? So this is a main point. This is an assertion. This is an announcement, not a main point. Then you want to customize each point for your particular audience. So here is a couple of pictures, right, that some of them you may recognize. So let's say that you want to give a speech and you've been given an assignment in a marketing class, let's say, to create a message to try to get people to come to Trinidad and Tobago to spend vacation. Right? So your goal is to market Trinidad and Tobago as a destination, a vacation destination, right? What main points are you going to make? Well, first you have to have a target audience, right? Because how you market Trinidad and Tobago is going to depend, it's going to vary depending on who the target audience is, right? So what if I'm talking to young people, younger adults, single people looking to come and mix it up and have a good time? What am I going to really focus on? Right here, come to Carnival, right? And I'll talk all about that. That's going to really be the highlight. What if I'm talking about families, young families, mom, dad, partners and kids, family units? I might focus on the beaches, world famous beaches like Maracas, right? Talk about Richard's Bacon Shark and different tours you can take related to these places and all of that, because I'm marketing to them. What if I'm talking about the empty nesters, older couples that, are maybe getting retired and they want to just a slower pace? Well, come and bird watch. I actually took this picture right here. This picture I took at Castara in Tobago. You see the little hummingbird? I beg your pardon? Hey, check it out. Give some love for Costara. All right. I took this at, what's the name of that? It's up on this restaurant and resort. It's high up on the hill, and it overlooks Costara Bay. Wait, we have a serious question over here. It could well be. I really don't remember the name of the place, but I took my wife there for dinner, and it was so lovely to watch the sunset there. And in fact, I mean, just within a minute of taking this picture, that little hummingbird stayed there, and the sun just came down, and it made the perfect silhouette. I have that on video. But anyway, this isn't about me and my photography skills, which I don't have much. But the point is, you talk about nice places for quiet, romantic getaways, beautiful scenes. You see? So you customize your points depending on the audience. All right? Now let's talk about organizing the main points. So I have these 3 main points, 4, 5 main points, 2 main points. How do I know which order to put them in? Which one should be first? Which one should be second? Which one should be third? Well, there are various patterns of organization that you can use. Okay? One is a chronological pattern. So if your main points are related to each other in time, then you could use a chronological pattern. So an example would be like a biographical speech where you talk about someone, first their childhood years, then their teenage years, then adulthood. You might talk about a brief history of, let's say, hip-hop music, something like that. And you might have hip-hop music in the 80s, and you talk about Run DMC and DJ Jazzy Jeff and the French Press. French Press. That's coffee. The Fresh Prince, right? French Press. I need a cup of coffee. All right. Then you might do hip-hop in the 90s. Talk about, I don't know, who was in the 90s? Low.
Notorious B.I.G.
There you go. Tupac, Notorious B.I.G. Now we're talking Lil Wayne. Was he 90? Or are we getting in 2000? Now hip hop in the 2000s. Now we got Lil Wayne and Lil Boosie and all the other Lils. No. Oh, okay. I don't know what I'm talking about. All right. We can have a debate. No, I'm not just talking. But you get the idea. It's related in time. Okay? That's chronological, or sometimes it's called the sequential pattern, time sequence pattern. Right? Then you might have a spatial pattern. Spatial pattern, when you hear the word, say the word spatial, if you think space, in terms of physical space, then you'll get it. Your main points are related in physical space, geography. So let's just say this ancient Egyptian obelisk, right? It has 4 panels with lots of hieroglyphs and different things. And so you might organize a talk if you were a tour guide about this. And you might say, well, on the north panel here, we see examples of this, that, and the other, and this and that. And then, well, if we look at the east panel, and then if we move behind now, look at the south panel, and finally, on the east panel, we find, and so see, you'd have 4 main points, and it's related to space, north, east, south. But let's say you wanted to look at maybe the effects of a bad hurricane that came through the Caribbean. And so you might talk about when it first developed out there off the coast of Africa, and then when it entered here, and then as it hit this island, and then as it hit this island, and you just follow it across a map, right? That's a spatial pattern, okay? Then there's the cause and effect pattern. The first point is a cause. So I'll talk about smoking tobacco, cigarette smoking. What's the effect? Lung cancer, right? Although, if I do this is a deductive approach, right? Cause, effect. But if I announce, today I'm going to talk to you about smoking cigarettes and how it leads to lung cancer, what is everyone who's a cigarette smoker going to do? They're going to tune out, turn off and tune out, right? So instead, I would start with effect and then come to the cause. So I'd start off talking about, there's some interesting things going on in cancer research today. In fact, if we look at different types of cancer, blah, 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 right? And then I would wind up talking a little bit about lung cancer. And then I'd say, what's causing this persistent high mortality rate and diagnoses of cancer? Well, pollution, environment, chemicals in our food and water, et cetera, being obese, not exercising. And then what's my last point going to be? But still, the number one culprit is cigarette smoke. And then you go, I knew it, but it's too late. You've already heard it all, and you can't unhear it. So you're going to walk out now, you storm out, but it's too late. It's too late. You've already heard it all. Yeah. All right. Then related to that is the problem cause solution or problem solution. So cause and effect is an informative speech. This is a persuasive speech where I'm trying to get you to accept my solution to change. So if I were still using the cigarette smoking example, for example, and we had the effect and we had the cause, then I might give you the solution. And it's this new program this new support group that we've started, and it involves 3 key aspects, and I'm trying to get you to sign up for that. Now it's moved into a persuasive speech where I'm trying to get you to do something. See? But here would be an example of a problem cause solution. So here's the problem, and I describe it, I illustrate it. What's the problem here? This deforestation. And what's causing it? Is that the results of a brush fire? Is it the result of air raids in northern Syria that have devastated the landscape? Is it a bad drought? Okay. No, would you believe that what caused this is rain falling from heaven? It's acid rain. Guess what caused the acid rain? There it is, burning fossil fuels. All right, real popular speech in a nation like Trinidad that its economy's tied with oil and fossil fuels, right? What's the solution? Clean, efficient wind energy, which I hope Trinidad and other Caribbean nations would get more on board with. I mean, you can get ahead of the curve here, become the world's innovator and leader in this kind of stuff. Let go of this old stuff. It's running out. All right, but this is an example, right? Problem, cause, solution. Point 1, point 2, point 3, right? And then there's just the good old-fashioned topical pattern, right? And that's just, the main points really aren't related to each other in any particular order. There's no rhyme or reason to the points, except that they're categories of something or types of something, okay? And I dare say that most speeches probably fall into the topical pattern, where you're just talking about, today I'm going to talk to you about the principles of leadership. What makes a great leader? Well, a great leader is someone who does this, and a great leader is someone who does this, and a great leader is someone who does this. Say, that's just a good old-fashioned topical speech. Types of, characteristics of, principles of, facts concerning, reasons for, all of those kinds of structures would be a topical pattern. So types of gardens. Well, you could have flower gardens, you could have produce gardens, you could have a Zen-for rock garden. Right? What? A gnome garden. Well, you have a gnome in your garden. Would you have just a garden full of gnomes? Okay. That freaked me out. Fun facts about Carnival. One fun fact about carnivals, lots of fits. Another fun fact about carnivals, Juvet. Another fun fact about the bands. Right? Principles of success. Vision. Gotta have vision. You gotta have motivation. And you have to have discipline. So you get the idea. These would be topical speeches. All right? Now all that's left is just to take your needle and thread and connect everything with good transitions. All right, you want to tie everything, make it flow well. All right, so transitions are like bridges between each of your sections of your speech. So between the introduction and the body, between the body and the conclusion, but also between each main point and also between each sub-point within each main point. You keep things flowing and connected with transitions. All right? So an example, now that we've examined the problem of crumbling infrastructure, let's turn our attention to the solution, tax reform. You know, until we start collecting enough tax revenue, we can't fix the bridges or whatever it is, right? So that would be an example of what kind of speech, what kind of organizational pattern. Not topical. Problem, cause, solution. Okay? Problem, cause, solution. All right? Transitions also serve as an internal summary. So each time you come to a transition, it's an opportunity for you to remind the audience what they just heard. And that's important. Kezia, can I borrow, is this your notebook?
Yeah, you done.
And I promise I won't read anything confidential. Brandon did what? Blank. All right. If, let's say you're at home and anybody have an exam coming up?
Yes.
And Friday, in what class? What? Phonology. Oh, phonetics. Oh, linguistics. That's fun stuff. Phonetics and phonology. I mean, doesn't that sound fun? It sounds like some kind of ancient tribe of people. Phoenicians right now. Phonetics and phonology. All right? So you have this exam and you need to study for it. And let's just say you have a textbook of, Introduction to Phonetics and Phonology, and it's riveting stuff. I mean, it's grab you by the seat of your pants and not let go. No, it's like, right? And so here you are, you're at home and you're reading, you're studying for your exam with your textbook, and at the same time, you're eating some roti or some KFC, you got a bucket of chicken over there, and you're streaming something on Netflix, and you have your earbuds in, and you're listening to your jams, and all this is going on, and you're kind of zoning in and out, and all of a sudden, you read something like, the fifth classification in the phonetic structure of whatever, and you're like, huh? The fifth? What were the first four? Did that ever happen to anybody reading the textbook? All right. So what do you do when that happens? You go back. And that's the beauty of having a text that's before you, right? Is you can go back and you have your highlighter, right? And what are you looking for? First. Now what's the next word you're looking for? Second. Where's the next word? Third. Highlight. Wasn't it? Fourth. Okay? So what it is that moment of when you woke up and realized you've been just staring at words and not really paying attention, then you did an internal summary. You went back to remind yourself what were the first four that you missed. Now here's the thing, when you're listening to a speech, the same thing happens. You zone in and you zone out, and all of a sudden the speaker says, and the fourth reason why you ought to, and you're like, the fourth? Where were the first three? I missed them. So you need, as a speaker, you need to remind the audience of what those points were. So before you state a new point, you always remind the audience of the points you just made. So what have we talked about so far? We did this, and we said this, and we said this. Now, you ready for the fourth one? Here's the fourth one, right? And that's an internal summary. It sounds redundant to you. Because, oh my God, I'm just repeating myself. But the audience will thank you for that. Because they need to be reminded. Because they can't flip the page back to remember what the first three were. Right? Okay. So, let's say we're giving a speech about Carnival. And we're talking about the ways that you can enjoy Carnival. So, as we can see, and at this point, I'm transitioning from my first main point to my second main point. So as we can see, Carnival involves lively music. Now, a second way you can enjoy Carnival is by observing the splendid costumes. All right? So what am I talking? I'm talking about ways you can enjoy. The first way you can enjoy is by enjoying the music, right? Lots of concerts, lots of music being played. What was the #1 street song this time? I can't say that, but all right. And the second way I'm saying is, man, look at all the beautiful costumes and the splendid. I went to Kitty Carnival this year, and I saw those costumes. They were nice. I enjoyed that. Like watching the little ones. I don't care about all the half-naked adults, but the little kids. I mean, those are great big costumes. It's really nice. All right. I was being generous when I said half-naked, wasn't I? Yeah, that was generous. All right. So now let me talk about my rules on transitions. Okay? Always restate the point you just made. That's what I just said to you, right? So as we can see, Carnival has lively music to enjoy. That was my main point. I've begun my transition to the second point by reminding my audience what the first point was. Okay? That's what's highlighted in red there. Now, always add an ordinal signpost. That's the first, second, third, fourth. What you're looking for in the textbook when you go back, right? That's the signpost. It's the marker, okay? So here, a second way. Now the audience is clear. We're moving on from the first point to the second point. So that's your ordinal signpost. Then always include your key word. The second what? The second way. Because that's my organizing key word. Each main point is a way. Then you're ready to state succinctly the next point. You can enjoy Carnival by observing the splendid costumes. All right? So, a restatement of the point you just made, an ordinal marker, the key word, and then clearly state the next main point. Every transition, do it that way. Okay? Then, also keep in mind that transitions are a great time for you to turn on the spotlight in your speech. So think about a spotlight on a stage. And what does the spotlight do? If you're at, let's say, a concert or a performance, it highlights, it focuses your attention, right? So there are lots of things going on, but right now we want you to focus right here. So let's say the band's playing and it's time for the guitar solo. Well, the drummer's still back there drumming, and the bass player's still playing bass, right? And the keyboardist is still playing keys, and all that's well and good, but right now, really, don't miss the guitarist because that's something special. The same way, when you're telling your main points, not all main points are created equal. Some are more important than others. Right? And so you might make a point like this. This brings me to my third and final point. Now, please listen. If you don't take anything else away today from this speech, let it be this one point right here. What did I just do? I turned on the spotlight. Said, this one's don't miss this one. It's super important. Okay? I did it a while ago. I was making a point about how main points should be what? Blank, not blank. Assertions. And what did I say about that before? I said, man, this makes a good fill in the blank. What did I do? I turned on the spotlight. I go, ooh, this is going to be on the test, y'all. Let me write that down. That's important. It's not that everything else I've been saying is not important, but it's like, hey, hear me now, believe me later. You're going to have to reproduce this one. Okay. So again, we come back full circle to the floor plan and what it looks like. Questions, comments, criticisms, preferably no criticisms. Yes. Yes. All right, so what you're going to do now as you go out to your tutorials, all right? I know some of you have tutorials on Thursday, but those of you who have tutorial today, oh, and before I forget, on that note, your tutorials have been relocated to this room, to this building. Yeah, this building. 2 will be, I think, I don't know if Harry Nannon, Mr. Harry Nannon's 2 tutorials at right after, and then what are they at 3 and 4? They will be right here. So if you're in Mr. Hannon's tutorial at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock, you're right here. If you're in Mr. Samad's, you're going to be, I think, upstairs. Oh, it's on this floor. Okay, and tutorial, what room number is it, Sean? Tutorial room 2. Okay, so that'll be more convenient for you. You don't have to go back. If you're in a Thursday tutorial, they stay right where they are, FHE 314A and B. But now listen, what you're going to do today or Thursday in your tutorial is you're going to put this into practice, what we've talked about today, by creating a very brief speech. Not really a speech, just a skeleton outline of a speech on the theme, what I did for carnival break. Okay? What? Listen, what I did for carnival break. And you're going to give 3 main points. Now, you might have done nothing. You may have just like rested, and that's what I did. I didn't do any of that. I went to Kitty Carnival the rest of the time while everybody else was getting all hot and sweaty and crowded in Port of Spain. I was out at Mayaro and different places at the beach, and I go to Mayaro all the time. I was beachcombing and in the bush, enjoying my time with nature, all right? So whatever you did, right, you're going to come up with 3 things, right? 3 things that you did during carnival break. You might have just, I rested. I caught up on schoolwork. I volunteered at my church or whatever, okay? So you'll come up with 3 things that you did, you'll state them, and you'll give an example. So if I say, my first main point is going to be, during carnival, I had fun. Okay? That's conceptual, right? And that's what main point should be. Now I'm going to give you, I'm going to specifically now with my subpoints tell you what I mean by having fun. And I might say, one way that I had fun during carnival break was, I played Juve. I didn't, but I could have, right? Second, so not only did I have fun by playing Juve, but a second thing I did during carnival break is I rested. I recharged my batteries. Right? And y'all, I must have taken at least 10 naps during carnival break. Serious. I rested. I needed to recharge my batteries after Carnival Tuesday. I'm making this up. This is hypothetical. Come on, man. All right. So not only did I have a fun time by playing Juve, and not only did I recharge my batteries by resting and taking a lot of naps, but a third thing I did during carnival break is, I went to Kitty's Carnival. Right? I went down, and then I would give you the example. I went down to the savannah, and I saw all these kids. In some cases, the little bitty ones with their parent or guardian walking across, and some even pushed in a baby carriage, and others carried, and in these elegant costumes, and took a lot of pictures and videos. And so, but that's the idea. All right? And it's just an exercise in learning this structure, developing it, and getting familiar with it. Okay? All right. Have fun, and I will see you next week. Oh, wait. I forgot. We have a representative from the Communication Studies Student Association who needs to make an announcement.